Hello, hello, everyone. Hope everyone is having a great day today. Welcome to our November workshop. Bear with me 1 minute. I just want to make sure that we are live everywhere, that we look good everywhere. So bear with me 1 minute. While you're here, for those who are here watching live, let me know in the comments that you're here live. Let me pull up. Oh boy, hold on. Now I can't find. Oop. Nope, that's what I want. Hold on. All right, I'm trying to figure out where the heck it is. Let me go ahead and stop this, pull myself up full screen here, and we will go ahead and get started. So let me just get the slides back up. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble on my double screen today. I apologize. I am having a lot of issues getting this up. So bear with me 1 second. Okay. All right, so I think we're good now. Apologies for that. So let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and dive right into this. And so today's topic, let me go ahead and share my, actually, that is the wrong screen. Hold on. Oh my goodness. Hold on. Go ahead and share my screen here. I think it's, actually, it doesn't really matter, I don't think. Oh, nope. Okay, we are falling apart today. So today's topic is setting smashable financial goals for the new year. And I wanted to do this workshop in particular this month, but certainly in this membership, because I think we kind of throw around this term of goals a lot. And, you know, look, you can Google business goals and you will find articles that are all about how business goals are really important to set and how you need to make sure you've got really strong business goals. And then you will find other ones that say goals are stupid and you shouldn't set goals. And instead you should look at things this way or that way. I kind of take a middle of the road approach. And we'll talk about this a little bit as we dive in. I think goals play an important role in our business, but I also don't think they're the end all be all. And we're going to talk about that today. But I do think that goals are a really important thing to start thinking about this time of year. It's, you know, kind of mid-November. We're getting to the end of the year. We're, for many of us, so we're recording this in 2020. So for many of us, this has been kind of a tough year. And so we're sort of thinking about, well, what is that next year going to look like? And what do we want to get out of that next year? And also, and I'll touch on this when we get into the workshop, but also when we think about goals, even though we maybe set them for the next year, I'm always thinking about them in kind of in that longer term context. So what are we really hoping to accomplish in the business long term? So goals can play an important role because of that. And so I wanted to bring this to y'all now because at least if you're anything like me, I think a lot of us are starting, you know, we're post the election now. So a lot of things have kind of cleared up. And even though we're very much still in the pandemic, a lot of things have kind of cleared up, and we're really starting to look ahead to that new year. And this is a good time to start thinking about goals. And I've actually titled the workshop Financial Goals, but to be honest, it's a little bit of an error because we're actually going to talk about financial and non-financial goals too. And even though I primarily teach about financial topics, non-financial goals are just as important as financial goals. And they actually, even though we call them non-financial goals, and we'll get into exactly what those mean, they actually have a financial element to them. And that's why we're going to continue to talk about them in this context. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, perfect. So I kind of already set this up, but the truth about goals. Look, goals, financial and non-financial, set an important intention for the year. So y'all probably know me well enough by now to know that I'm not the kind of person who, talks all about mindset and manifestation and things like that. Not saying that they don't exist or they're not important. It's just not my thing. But I do think when it comes to what we want to see happen in our business, I think setting goals can really be a good way to kind of put that intention out there and sort of put that stake in the ground and say, this is really what I want to accomplish in the following year, in the following quarter, and so on and so on. So I like that they serve that purpose. It's kind of like, they always tell you if you want to get a new habit or accomplish something, tell a friend, right? Tell somebody put it out in public. Because then once it's out there, number one, you're going to feel a lot more accountable to the people you've told, but also you've kind of put it out there. You've put it out there in the world, and that makes it a lot more likely that it'll happen. Goals also serve as an important marker to really design your roadmap. So we're going to talk about this a lot today, because this is really actually the key piece of goal setting, in my opinion, is building out the roadmap. And so when I say they're an important marker, it's just that. If you were going to go from, I guess let me start, the camera is over here, point A to point B, point B would be your marker, right? And so then okay, I'm trying to get here. So where do I need to go? What do I need to do to get there? And so goals can really serve as that marker for you. But as I said when I first started this off, goals are not everything. So they shouldn't be a marker of your success. For example, if you don't hit your goal, the answer shouldn't be, well, I failed, or I wasn't successful, or it wasn't a good year, or I didn't do well, or I didn't do something right. Goals are not everything, and they shouldn't be treated as if they're everything. I am a big proponent of focusing on the process over the product or the end goal. And we're going to talk a bit in a few slides about why that is. But I just want you to kind of think about that and keep that in the back of your mind, that let's focus, and this is actually in any area, not just in goals, but in any area of our business, focusing on the process over the product. Because ultimately, if that's what we do, then we're going to end up creating something that's more sustainable, that's, excuse me, more stable, more long lasting. And again, we'll talk about that in a couple of slides. So, and as I'm going through this, if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Happy to answer questions as I go along. For folks who are watching this on the replay, if you're watching the live stream on the replay, so you're watching us over here on Facebook or in the members channel on YouTube, feel free to drop questions as well. I'll get notified and I can follow up with you as well. But don't forget, we also have next week our Q&A and hot seat session as well. So you can always come to that and ask your questions. So let's talk about the three, because I kind of said, I went the right way. I kind of said there's sort of three pieces to this, right? There's setting the intention, there's design, setting the marker to design your roadmap, and then there's focusing on process over product. So let's now dive into each one of these. Excuse me. So the first one, setting an intention for the year. And again, this is a reason why, or this is one of the reasons why I think goals are important to set. First and foremost, I think it helps you prioritize what's important. So whenever I'm setting my goals, and we'll talk about the number of goals in a little bit, but I generally recommend that you don't have that many goals. You don't have 10 or 20 or 30 goals, right? So whenever I'm actually setting my goals, it forces me to really sit down and think about what I want to focus on. So, for example, last year coming into this year, I remember starting to kind of write down some things, and I thought, well, I want to get more email subscribers, and I want to grow my Instagram following, and I want to grow my Facebook group, and I want to, grow my revenues. I want to grow my core, and I started throwing out all these different things, right? And not everything was sales specific. Some things were, I want to build out my team. I want to be able to take Fridays off, so there were goals like that too, right? And I think by the end of the exercise, probably about 15, 20 minutes, I had about 15 or 20 different goals that I wanted to achieve. And while I'm not saying you can't work towards all of those in some sense, that's a lot to really focus on. And the reality is that if you choose that many to focus on, that many different disparate goals to focus on, then you're going to have a hard time really getting too much done or getting too far with any of them, because your focus is just going to be so split. So the sort of first piece of this is setting these goals helps you really prioritize what's important. And when you do that exercise, you put those 15 to 20 goals out I do it on a whiteboard. And we're going to do an exercise here in a few minutes so you can see kind of what this looks like. When you put all those out there and then you're sort of forced to bring them down to 3 to 5, let's just say, it really forces you to kind of have some conversations with yourself about, well, what really matters? What do I really want to focus on? So at the end of the day, coming into this year, I said I want to focus on growing my email list. I said I want to focus on growing the number of students into my course. I didn't have the membership yet, so that wasn't on my radar. But fun fact, starting a membership was actually one of my goals. And, got rid of, get more Instagram followers. I got rid of, grow out my team. I get rid of a few other things that, yeah, I cared about and I'd love to do, but at the end of the day, just weren't going to be my top priorities for this year because I knew that I needed to turn my attention to just a few things I could really focus on and make great progress in those. The second piece kind of about setting this intention for the year through your goals is it also will help fuel excitement and motivation. So if you walk away from the table once you've laid out your goals and you don't feel excited, you don't feel motivated to go do the work, then that's a really good indicator that whatever goals you've chosen are not the best ones for you for this year for your business. They may be good goals, but they're just not the right fit for, and again, it's for you for this year for your business. It might be that in a different year, one of those goals would be more appropriate. It might be that if you had a different business, they would feel better. But if you walk away from the table not feeling excited, not feeling motivated, then that's a good indicator that those aren't the right fit for you right now. And so really setting these goals that are the right fit, setting the right intention, gives you that additional excitement, that additional motivation, which can, I think, especially after a year like we've had for so many of us, can really help propel you into the new year and start it off on a good foot. And then the last is goals sort of help you put your big dreams into tangible form. So, I've worked with a lot of people who, when I start to talk to them and I say, well, what are your big dreams? Where do you see your business 5 years from now? And they'll say something like, I want freedom, I want flexibility, I want stability, I want success. Well, what does that really mean, right? What does that really mean? So goals really give us kind of a tool, I suppose, to break that into very tangible results. So what does freedom look like? Well, freedom might look like, being able to pick up at any time and go travel if you want. What does flexibility look like? Flexibility might mean, not having meetings on your calendar. Maybe you're not doing one-on-one client work, and you've set up a system with your team where you don't do meetings. And so maybe for you, that kind of flexibility is really important to you, where you can kind of use your time however you want. What does success look like? So it helps us take these big dreams we have and really break them down into very tangible outcomes that we can then create roadmaps to work towards. Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to grab one thing that I'm going to want in 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So let's go to the next slide. So the second benefit of setting goals is that they basically serve as a marker so that you can design your roadmap. I use this term roadmap a lot in business. You can plan, or you can use whatever term you want. But I like it because I like it for a couple of reasons. Number one, a roadmap is a guide for how to get from point A to point B, right? But what I also like, and the reason why I strategically use the term roadmap, is in almost every situation, there is more than one way to get from point A to point B. Sometimes it'll take longer. Sometimes it'll, it'll, I don't know, have more stumbling blocks or whatever. It'll have more detours. But the reason I like it over maybe using the word plan is a plan implies that we're going to sit down and we're going to write steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to get from A to B. And that's just how you have to do it. And if something doesn't happen in line with that plan, then it's wrong, or you've made a misstep. Whereas with a roadmap, you say, okay, to get from point A to point B, I'm going to go, I think I'm going to go this way. But then if something comes up, you're like, okay, I'm actually going to take this detour, go over here, and then I can come back over here, and then I can still get there, right? So that's why I like this idea of a roadmap versus something like a plan. Now, look, the reality is for every achievement that we want to have, we have to design a plan to get there. We don't just wake up in the morning and have great success, or become a best-selling author, or get the job of our dreams, or whatever it may be. We have some kind of a plan to get there. And so goals give us those markers, those points B and C and D and E, as places we want to stop along the way, right? They also give us a place to work back from. So again, that point B, it gives us a place to say, okay, this is where we want to go. Now, how do we work backwards, and how do we get from where we are to there? And so having them is really important. It's a point on our journey. But much like with a roadmap, there are lots of points on a potential journey, right? And you don't always have to stop at every single one. So, and we'll get into this a little bit on the next slide, but this is why I say that goals aren't everything, because you shouldn't feel as though if you didn't hit that goal, you've somehow screwed up the whole journey. You failed, right? That's not true at all. They're just a point in the journey. And if we don't go to that one, we can go to another one and we can still do the journey that we want to do, right? Now, when we're talking about our roadmap and designing a roadmap, it's important that we want to look at both the financial and the growth goals. So, and we'll again dive into this in a little bit, but financial would be something very obvious, like I want to make $100,000 in revenues. Growth goals or non-financial goals would be something like I want to grow my email list by 1,000 people. So it's important that our roadmap, that we create a roadmap to reach all of those goals. Now, I talked about a couple slides ago about this idea of process over product. There is an author wrote a book that many of you may have heard of called Atomic Habits, James Clear. And he really subscribes to this idea of the process over the product. And I think he does a really great job. A lot of people talk about this, but I think he does a really great job of just putting it very succinctly. So he's got a quote in the book that says, where he says, the purpose of setting goals is to win the game. The purpose of having systems is to keep playing the game. And I think this is a, excuse me, a really good distinction between the two, because, and I think I actually, yeah, pretty sure, I'm pretty sure I do this on the next page. Excuse me. The way I like to think about it is think about somebody who decides they're going to train for something. So let's just say you're going to train for like a marathon, right? And you wake up and you put this plan into place. You say, I'm going to, run X number of miles every single day, and then I'm going to run the marathon. And this person does the whole training plan, and then they run the marathon, and then they're done. There's nothing that comes after the marathon, right? Now they did the whole training plan, which was great, but there's nothing more. Versus you think about somebody who wakes up and says, instead of saying I'm going to train for a marathon, they wake up and say, I'm going to become a runner. So instead of having this really intense plan that, is going to hurt their body and gets them to the marathon, but maybe they're so burnt out after that, they're going to sit there and say, okay, how can I build running into who I am and my habits and my lifestyle and make it so much a part of me that it's just something that I become, right? So it's creating a system for becoming a runner so that you may or may not ultimately decide to run a marathon, and that's great, but that system is always part of your lifestyle. So that you basically, into this quote, running the marathon would be the example of winning the game, right? That would be the goal you'd set. But becoming a runner and making that such a part of who you are and kind of at the core of who you are, that's about continuing to play the game. So when we think about goals in our business, there's a risk here that if we only focus on the goals, if we say, okay, my goal is to hit 6 figures, my goal is to hit 7 figures, excuse me, whatever it may be, you hit that point and then it's like, okay, well, now I have to figure out how to get to the next point, right? And then you hit that point. Okay, now I have to figure out how to get to the next point. But if instead you put systems into place, systems that do end up helping you hit those goals, but more importantly, they do more than that, and they actually continue this perpetual motion of reaching, more revenues, more email subscribers, more social media followers, more website traffic, whatever it may be, right? So putting that system in place is so much more critical than actually hitting the goal, because hitting that goal doesn't get you anywhere beyond that goal. You hit that goal and you're done, and then you've got to figure out the next one. Putting that system in place gives you everything you need to continue to hit goal after goal after goal after goal. And so some of what we're going to talk about today is some of those systems, but the system is going to be very specific to what aspect of your business you're talking about, right? So again, if it's email subscribers, if it's Instagram followers, if it's increasing revenues, the system for that is going to be very specific. Okay, so I told you we're going to talk about both financial and non-financial goals. But let's just kind of cover each separately. So, and with a few tips for each. And so when we talk about financial goals, these can be anything from a revenue goal. So I want to make $100,000 in sales, to a profit goal. Remember, profit being very different from revenue, to savings. So maybe you are anticipating a big expansion in your business and you want to, well, actually that would be kind of investment. So I guess the savings example would be, maybe you've consistently kind of gone sort of sale to sale in your business in terms of paying your expenses. And you say, you know what, this year I want to build up a savings buffer so that I don't have to worry about having that cash in the bank, so that you could set a goal for that. Investment goals would be if you were anticipating an expansion and you wanted to save up the funds to be able to do that, you could set an investment goal. The piece of advice I'll give you for this is to not just choose a number. And I see this happen a lot. People will say, like, I want to hit $100,000 or I want to hit 7 figures or whatever. Don't just choose a number, have some actual meaning behind it. And this actually goes back to my point earlier about feeling inspired and motivated and excited by your goals. Because if you're just randomly picking a number, the chances are pretty good you're not going to feel inspired or motivated or excited about that goal. The number needs to mean something. And we're not going to dive into the super specifics today in this workshop, but this is where looking at your budget, and so what kind of numbers do you need? So let's just say we're talking about a revenue and a profit goal, right? Looking at your budget and saying, what do I need to hit so that I can pay myself X, so that I can put this, put Y in savings, whatever it may be, right? So what is that number? Have it actually be tied to something that that is a number you need to reach to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So looking at your budget, but also looking at kind of down the road. So for example, if you want to hire people, maybe it's looking at it and saying, okay, I need to hit X number of clients, or I need to hit X number of students, or maybe it is hitting a certain revenue level before you're ready to hire. But tying that number to something very specific, making sure it has meaning behind it, is going to make that goal much more meaningful and something that will actually inspire you to take action. And then lastly, and I kind of already touched on this a little bit, but consider the financial goal in the context of where you've come from. So meaning, if we're talking about revenues, how much did you do in revenues last year? But also where you're going and where you want to go. And I say this, and there's a couple of examples I want to give. So, sometimes what I see happen is people will, so let's just say you made $25,000 in revenues last year. People will say, well, this year I want to make $500,000 in revenues. I'm not saying it's impossible, but going from 25,000 to 500,000 is a pretty big leap, right? So you definitely want to make sure you consider the goal in the context of where you've been. On the flip side, I've seen some people, so let's take the same $25,000 last year. You might have somebody who says, oh, okay, so I made 25,000 revenues last year. I'm going to set my goal at 26,000 this year. Most likely a pretty doable goal, right? But it's not really taking into consideration where that person as a business owner wants to go, because I'm guessing that person as a business owner doesn't just want to increase their revenues by $1,000 every year, so that 5 years from now they're making $30,000 in revenues, right? I'm guessing that business owner, if you ask them, where do you want to be 5 years from now, is probably going to say something very different than a $30,000 a year business. So consider that goal that you choose also in the context of where you're going and not just where you've come from. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so non-financial goals, excuse me. So examples of non-financial goals could be growing your community or your exposure. So in terms of community, it could be number of clients, it could be your email list, your number of followers. This could be podcasts you interview on. It could be articles that are written about you. It could be guest blog posts that you do. So just kind of in general, expanding your reach. You could also have goals tied to customer loyalty. So do you want to increase the number of repeat customers? Do you want to increase the number of referrals that you get? Those are all things that are tied to customer loyalty. You could have goals tied to customer service. Do you want to increase your retention rate, meaning how many clients you keep versus how many you lose? Do you want to increase your positive reviews? Do you want to increase, how highly people rate you when you send them a survey? Those could be examples or are examples of non-financial goals. You could also have non-financial goals related to employee growth. And this could be kind of an overall thing, meaning you want to grow your team overall, but it could also be goals specific to your current employees. So, it could be about increasing their metrics over the year or increasing their professional development, things like that. Now, every single one of these goals, and I said this at the beginning, every single one of these goals, we're calling them non-financial, but these are financial goals in the sense that every single one of these things is going to benefit that bottom line. It's going to benefit your profit. Excuse me. It's just doing it indirectly versus having the very specific financial goals. And I highly recommend having a mix of financial and non-financial goals. I don't think you should just have one type or the other. So a few factors to consider when you're setting your goals. And again, we're going to actually go into a goal setting exercise. So we'll pull this all together. And some of this we've kind of already touched on a little bit, but one factor to consider are those long-term goals and objectives. So where do you want to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What does that look like? And kind of working back, right? Again, that person who wants to, who's made $25,000 in revenues last year, maybe they want to make $500,000 5 years from now. So increasing the goal by $1,000 every year isn't going to get them there. So what do they have to do to get from the 25K to the 500K in 5 years? So thinking about those long-term goals. Also thinking about personal influences. And excuse me, what I mean by this is what's going on personally that might affect these goals. And so this could be, maybe you just had a baby, or maybe you want to scale back, or maybe you want to ramp up and do more work. Maybe you were part-time before and now you're going to be full-time in your business. It could also be things going on in the world. If you, we've got the pandemic right now, right? I mean, I think that's probably a pretty good one. That's probably going to influence your goals that you set, for next year. So just kind of thinking about what those sort of outside influences and personal influences are. And then lastly, any one-time events or factors. So, I used the baby example, but if you were going to have a baby this year, so you're going to be out for 3 months, let's just say, you might adjust your goals for that. If you are getting married, or if you decide you want to take a few months off, travel, whatever it may be, adjusting for those one-time events or factors. So I wanted to show this. This is and many of you may know this. This is a very old standard for setting goals called the SMART method. And normally I tend to reject very traditional kind of strategies and methods and whatnot. But this one I think is a good one, and I really haven't seen a great replacement for this. So I did want to show this, and I don't think, it's like I can't remember what I have next. Sorry. So I'm just going to talk through each one, but basically what the SMART method says is that all of your goals should be these 5 things. They should be SMART. So first, they should be specific. So an example of this, of course, would be, I want to hit $100,000 in revenues versus I want to hit 6 figures in revenues. 6 figures could be 100,000. It could be 999,000, right? So you want to be as specific as possible. The second is you want it to be something that's measurable, whether it's a financial or a non-financial goal. So this tends to trip people up a little bit more when it's non-financial. So let's talk about that example. So this could be, instead of I want to grow my email list, it could be I want to add 1,000 subscribers. Instead of I want to get more exposure, it could be I want to book 10 podcast interviews and write 5 guest blog posts, or whatever. So making it something that can actually be measured versus something that, if you just said, I want to be more successful, or I want my employees to be happier, that's really hard to measure. The third is making it something that's attainable. And this, I think, really goes back to that point of thinking about both where you want to go, but also where you're coming from, and what feels realistic within that context. And attainable is really going to get into, I was going to pull something up here actually, but one second. It's really going to, and actually realistic as well, is really going to get into, or we're going to get into it when we look at the roadmap. because this is really where you kind of sit there and um, map out what's possible. And if you get to the point where you're really pushing things in your roadmap to hit that goal, then that kind of tells you, okay, maybe this isn't actually, um, uh, maybe this isn't actually the best goal for me. um, and then, okay, so what else? And so then we've got, realistic, or I'm sorry, we've got relevant. And actually, it shouldn't say realistic here. It should say relevant. So I apologize. That's an error on our slide. But relevant, no, I can't. Well, yeah, we'll change it right now because it's going to bug me. Relevant really is basically saying, does this goal matter now? Is this the important goal to be focusing on right now? Is this the right time? Does this align with our other goals and efforts in the business? Is it applicable within the context of everything that's going on in the world? So, for example, during this current pandemic, you probably wouldn't set a goal to open 10 new retail locations. That probably just isn't relevant in the current context. Similarly, if you, let's say one of your really big priorities for next year was to get more flexibility and get more freedom with your time, then setting a goal of booking, 5 more one-on-one clients every single month might not be the most relevant goal, because adding 5 clients to your schedule is going to cut down on your available time, and it's going to cut down on your flexibility. So it's really just thinking about, is this goal relevant to kind of everything else within the context of my business? And then lastly is making sure it's a timely goal. And so, excuse me. And sometimes people will refer this one as time bound, but it's essentially making sure that your goal has a deadline or an end date. So, I want to hit $100,000 by the end of 2021. And making sure that it's something that you've got a very specific point or deadline for. So again, this is kind of the gut check I run for all my goals. Do they sort of hit each of these 5 things? And it's a nice little thing to just check off and make sure that my goals align with what I'm trying to do. Okay, so no, hold on, I gotta go back over here. All right, how are we doing on time? We're good on time. So let's talk about creating your roadmap. I've mentioned this before, but you want to work backwards. You want to start from the end. So basically, you want to know where you're trying to get to and work backwards. It's really important to break it down into easy to manage steps. And so typically, I'll actually do this in multiple rounds. So I'll kind of map out my sort of first round, and then I'll go back, and each of my steps I'll break down a little bit more. And then I might even do it one more time, depending on how specific I've gotten in that second round. Because the more you can break it down into easy to manage and easy to manage steps that you can delegate, that you can automate, that you can kind of feed into your task software, the more likely it is that you're actually going to get all of these things done to hit that goal, that you're going to follow the roadmap. Now, again, I want to be clear. Stuff's going to come up, right? You're not always going to be able to follow the roadmap to the T, and that's okay. But we want to at least set out, much like you would leave your house and say, this is the plan. We're going to take this route. You want to at least set out with that intention. If there's traffic, you can divert. But you at least leave the house sort of knowing that that's the way you want to go. I also highly recommend that you look at quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily goals. Now, daily may not apply to every single project, depending on kind of the scope of the project, but breaking these down into those chunks, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily, is really good, because it gives you a really good sense for what you should be working on at any given point. So that instead of seeing this goal of, I want to hit $100,000 by the end of 2021, and that feels very overwhelming, it's, oh, okay. My goal is to hit 25,000 by the end of Q1. And in order to get there, we're going to hit, 10,000 in the first month. And to get there, we're going to do X. And so by breaking it down into those little chunks and also time chunks, makes it a lot easier to kind of see what you need to focus on in the immediate moment. And then my last point there, and I've been reiterating this, is to plan for detours. That, know that not everything is going to go according to your roadmap, according to your plan, and have backups, have those detours that you can take if something doesn't quite work out. Now, some of these you're going to be able to plan for at the very beginning. So you're going to be able to say, okay, if this doesn't end up happening, we'll do this instead. But others you're going to learn about along the way. There may be pieces that you think you're going to be able to do and you don't end up being able to do. We certainly learned that this year with the pandemic. And so being flexible and coming back to this roadmap on a regular basis is a really important part of the process. All right, so let's dive in. I want to show y'all an example. Let me go here for 1 second. Bear with me. I'm going to pull up. I don't know if we'll have time to do both examples. I was going to do a financial and a non-financial, and I do want to try to get to as many as I can. Let me also, okay, so, and this is just, I'm just using a whiteboard tool here. This is not something you have to have. This is just to kind of show you what I would basically do. So let's just say I decided that my goal was going to be $100,000 in revenues. Revenues by end of 2021, and I will pull that over so y'all can actually see that. And this is not going to be pretty, but that's okay. Okay, $100,000 in revenues by the end of 2021. That's my goal, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to probably break this into steps. And so what I want to do is we're going to grab this little we're going to make this small because I'm not very good at I'm not very good at nope, what am I doing? Nope, stop. Not very good at drawing. Okay. This is not going to be the prettiest thing in the world, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. This is solely so that I could kind of show you. None of these are the same size. Again, does not matter. So basically what I'm now doing is kind of breaking this into quarters, right? So we're going to make this guy a little bigger because he's a little smaller than his buddies. We're also going to try to move some of these out. So this is the first step, is I'll come in here and I'll basically say, okay, what's my goal going to be every month? Now, for the sake of our example, we're going to just assume it's literally, what am I doing? That it's literally just going to be the same every month. In your case, that may not be true, right? Maybe you take off summers because your kids are out of school, or maybe you have a more seasonal business. But for the sake of our example, because I want things to be simple, we are going to assume that $100,000 breaks down into $25K every single quarter, right? Okay, so now I've broken it into quarters, and actually I could put, if I really wanted to, oh, what am I doing? Oh my gosh. I could actually do this too. And apologies that this is ugly, but it's for illustrative purposes only. And this is literally, I mean, this is what I will sit here and do, and I'll usually do it on a notepad. Now, my final kind of roadmap or plan, I end up putting into a nicer document. So I was like, I wonder what I did there. Nope, I did not want to do that. That's okay. Now I'm trying to make it pretty and it's not working, which is why I just shouldn't try. But this is what I'll do when I first start out, is I literally will have a notepad and I'll just start drawing, or I'll do it on my whiteboard in my office. So now I've kind of broken these goals down by quarter, right? Now, I'm also then going to do the same thing by month. And right now I'm literally just dividing the number, right? We haven't even gotten to the action items that I need to do to get there. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that, and this will be month, this is January. I'm just going to do January. And let's just say in January, we want to do, 9K. So basically, or actually I'll go easy on myself. We'll start off with 8 for the first month, right? And then I'm going to come into, and I'm just going to do this for the first quarter. I'm not going to do every quarter, but because you'll get the idea of what I'm doing. So then we'll say, okay, maybe we're going to go to 9K after that, because now we're in the second month. We've had a little time to gear up. And then, ooh, my squares are not pretty. And then March, what does that put me at? That puts me at 17. So March, we're back to 8K. So these are going to be my goals. Okay. So now, now that I have like a better sense, and you can also do this and literally break it down into weekly if you want as well. But now that I have a better sense, okay, now this is what I have to hit in each month. So then what I'm going to do, let's look at January. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, and actually, let me, oh, I am not trying to do anything. Oh my goodness. What am I doing? I swear, it's like I don't have a clue what I'm doing today. So then I'm going to look at January and I'm going to say, okay, what are some of the things to get to 8 grand? How am I going to get there? So let's say, we'll take my business. I offer a course and I offer, I'm going to make this a little smaller so y'all can see. Hopefully you can still see if I make it that small. So I offer a course and I offer a membership. Okay. So, and again, to keep this easy, I'm just going to say, okay, I want to make 4K from each of my things, right? So then actually I'm going to do these separately. Just because you'll understand when I do this next. Okay. Those are my 2 things, right? So then I'm going to look here and say, okay, how do I get to 4K in my course? So how many courses is that? And actually, I'm going to go back here and just do it in this one. And we're just going to keep things super simple. Let's just say it's $1,000 course. So that's 4 courses. Excuse me. Now let's just say for every person that kind of goes through my course funnel, just to make this simple, let's just say for every 10 people that go through, 1 person buys. So I have a 10% conversion rate, right? And I want to sell 4 courses. So that means I need to put 40 people to go through my funnel. 40 people go through, 4 people will ultimately buy, right? So if I'm going to get 40 people, then I need to think about, well, how am I going to get those 40 people? And then I would literally sit here and I might say, okay, I'm going to get, let's just say I'm going to get 30 of them from Facebook ads. And then I'm going to get, 5 from my Instagram and then 5 from my Facebook group. And I literally sit there and I kind of break out what I'm going to do to get each of those things. Remember I talked about with specific how I would do kind of multiple rounds, right? So my first round when I'm doing this sort of roadmap would have been to say, okay, 100,000 in revenues breaks into the 25K per quarter and then breaks into these monthly goals. Pretty specific, but not, still going to kind of break it down a little bit more, right? So then I kind of go back and I say, okay, how can I hit the 8K? How do I get there? And this is where I start to look at where the revenue is going to come from, and then also look at the numbers that I need to make that revenue. And so I could do the same thing for my membership. How many memberships is that? How many people is it? Where are those people going to come from? And then I literally build out the steps to get there. So if we look at this course and I say, okay, we want to get 30 people from Facebook ads. Let's just say that in order to get 30 people, that means we need to I don't know, we need to spend, we need to run 2 ads that spend X amount of dollars per day, et cetera, right? So I'm going to write all of that out. Excuse me. And then I'm going to put the steps for that. Get the graphics, write the copy, set up the Facebook ad, monitor the Facebook ad, et cetera, et cetera. Facebook group. We want to get 5 people from the Facebook group. Okay, well, how am I going to get those 5 people? Am I going to get them from lives? Am I going to get them from from doing posts? How many posts am I going to write? And then what are the tasks for that? Get the graphics, write the copy, schedule the posts, schedule the lives, et cetera, et cetera. So you see, I just kind of build out, and now I'm building my roadmap of what we have to do to hit the 4K in courses, to hit the 8 grand in January, to hit the 25K in Q1, to hit the 100,000 in 2021. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. We can do the exact same thing. Let me go back here. Actually, no, you know what? I don't need to show you anything because the next slide is literally just says non-financial. But we can do the exact same thing with the with the non-financial goal. Let me pull my whiteboard back up again. We could do the exact same, we could do the exact same thing with the non-financial goal. Instead of 25K, I don't know why this is not letting me. No, that was not what I wanted to do. JK. Oh my goodness, we're just gonna move this guy out of here. I don't know why this is giving me a hard time. Probably because it's the end of the day and my computer has decided to revolt. I did not want to group them, but this 25K, instead of being $25,000, it could be 25,000 people on our email list. And again, same thing, we break it down. So it doesn't matter that it's got a dollar sign in front of it. You can do the exact same process. And so what I do then, again, I draw this all out, do it on my whiteboard. Once I get my specifics around each goal figured out, and again, I'm usually thinking about 3 to 5 goals. Once I get those figured out, I then will typically put them into a document. So usually I'll do usually I'll do like an Excel and basically just put them in and what are the numbers and what are all the tasks. And then I actually upload my tasks into my task software, which is I personally use ClickUp, a tool called ClickUp. But that's kind of my process. But this whiteboard process really allows me to kind of draw it out because I don't know all of these things off the top of my head, right? I mean, I sat here and said 100,000. We made it simple by breaking it into 25K for each quarter. But I may want to move some things around or change some things as I'm thinking this through and as I'm sketching it out. So that's why I like doing this whiteboard process at the beginning before I really go to create the kind of nice, clean document that ultimately becomes my roadmap. And I will tell you, I share that roadmap with people on my team because I want them to know exactly where we're going. But I also, again, I talked about the tasks and how I put them in ClickUp. I also do that, so I'll set my goals by mid-December. I will make sure those tasks are in ClickUp for pretty much the whole year, because I now know the roadmap. Now, we may need to change some of them as we get later into the year if things change. But I like having them all in there for my entire team so they know what's expected of them. They know what needs to be done. And that way we're never at risk of somebody kind of not following through and then not doing an important component that needs to occur in order to stay on to the roadmap. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen here. We've got just a couple more slides that I want to get to before we wrap up, and I think we're good on time, which is good. And again, I know we've got a couple of people watching live. If anyone has questions, let me know. Oh, nope, way too far ahead. Okay, so a few final thoughts I wanted to share with you. And I started this workshop by saying this one, but it's so important that I wanted to reiterate it again, which is that your goals that you set are not permanent. So, again, think about that roadmap. There are many different ways to kind of get to where you want to go. And these goals that you set are not the ultimate end point. They're really just markers on that roadmap to basically say, we're kind of heading in this direction. And so if you don't hit those goals, or if you want to change the goals, maybe you get halfway through the year and decide that what you were focused on is actually not what you want to be focused on, or something happens and you pivot, that's okay. Again, these goals are just markers to sort of point you in the right direction. I mentioned this a couple of times, but don't drown in your goals. I recommend choosing 3 to 5 core goals. Now, you may have sort of grouped goals. So for example, and actually I wish I had pulled these up to remember them exactly, but I had, when I set my goals for my business last year, I had 2 or 3 main categories. And one of my categories was exposure. So what I meant by exposure was I wanted to get out there in front of more people. And so under exposure, I actually ended up having 2 or 3 kind of sub goals, right? So my sort of high level goal was I want to have more exposure. Now that's not a SMART goal, which is exactly why that didn't become one of my final goals, if you will. It was more of a category. But within that category of exposure, I had 2 primary goals. Number 1 was to get on a certain number of podcasts, and number 2 was to speak on a certain number of stages. And so you can have situations where you've got a couple of very similar goals that kind of feed into a bigger purpose. In this case, for me, it was getting more exposure. So you might have considered that getting more exposure one of my 3 to 5 kind of core things I was focused on, with some sub goals that happen to be SMART, or that are certainly SMART goals. So that's something you could do as well. I also recommend having a good mix of financial and non-financial. So for me, I had, I believe it was 2 or 3 financial goals. So I had I had a revenue goal and I had a profit goal and I had a goal for how much I wanted to pay myself. But then I also had, I think, about three. So I went a little over the 3 to 5. But I also had three non-financial goals. So email list subscribers was a goal of mine. Podcast interviews was a goal of mine. And speaking on stages was a goal of mine. So I had specific numbers for those. Lastly, and sorry, to go back to actually one more point about that, I would recommend having kind of at least 2 financial goals, or I wouldn't have like 1 financial goal and 4 non-financial goals. I would have a good balance of the two. Excuse me. And the reason I say that is because sometimes when it comes to numbers and money, people get really freaked out when we start talking about dollar signs. And so it's a lot easier for a lot of folks to focus on email subscribers or Instagram followers or um, you know number of visitors to your website than it is to focus on revenues or profits or dollars investing back in your business or money you're paying yourself. And so you want to make sure you've got a good balance of the two different types. Lastly, and I kind of said this before, focus on the systems and the processes, not the outcomes. So we didn't really dive into the systems and processes in this workshop. I said this at the beginning that we weren't, primarily because they really are going to vary depending on what the goal is and what you're trying to accomplish. But if we go back to, let me pull back to the whiteboard real fast for a second to just give you a sense for how I would think about this. If we go back here, and in this case, it was a financial goal to hit $100,000 in revenues. Excuse me. And so part of that goal is getting 4,000 in sales for courses every month. What I'm going to be more focused on isn't making sure I hit the 4,000 every month. It's how can I set up the best funnel possible to get people into my world, to nurture them, to get them interested in my course, and then ultimately convert them to my course. So if what happens, if let's say it's the middle of January and I check my numbers, and instead of being halfway to my $4,000 goal, $2,000, I'm only $500 to my goal, I'm not going to freak out about that number. Instead, I'm going to focus on, well, what does my system look like? Is my system good? Do I like my system? So maybe I'm learning that I need to do more nurturing until I convert people to buy the course. I'm not going to see that as a failure because I don't end up hitting my goal in January. I'm going to now readjust and kind of evaluate how does that affect things long term, because at the end of the day, I would rather have a better system set up that ultimately does get me those sales and keeps me long-term clients than just hitting that number. Because look, at the end of the day, I could hit that $4,000. Maybe I had a good month. Maybe if a few extra people found me or whatever. Maybe I got on. Maybe somebody called me and wanted me to go on their podcast totally out of the blue, and I did, and that got me a bunch of sales, right? But if I'm not doing anything to replicate that next month and the next month and the next month, then that's not going to happen again. So, or we can't count on it to happen again. And so it's more important that you focus on those systems and how are you getting those, how are you getting sort of continual action coming through than just saying, oh, we were successful because we hit that, whatever that goal was. So hopefully that makes sense for folks. Okay, so let me just pull up. I think we've got 1 or 2 more, and I don't see, oh, I see 1 question so far. So let me do the last slide and then I will answer this question. And if anyone else has questions, please feel free to let me know. So I just wanted to share this quote. This is another quote by Jason Clear, which I think is also a great quote. He says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." We're going to be talking about systems a lot going into the new year. But again, I think this is a really important takeaway, is at the end of the day, goals play a really important role in your business, but they're nothing if you don't have the right systems and processes in place. And again, go back, think about that marathoner. In fact, I could give y'all an even better example, actually. 5 years ago, a friend talked me into signing up for a half marathon. I didn't train at all. I showed up on the day of, and we survived the half marathon. Like, we made it. We physically survived. But my goal in that case was to survive the half marathon, right? So in theory, yeah, I was successful because I met my goal. But I'm not a runner. I haven't run other, half marathons or marathons since then. So think back to that first James Clear quote about how, goals are about winning the game. Systems are about staying in the game, right? So when we think about wanting to build successful and stable and sustainable long-term businesses, we really need to think back to, um, what are those systems and processes we need to put into place so that we're continually building, is continually taking action and building growth in our businesses. So all that's to say that goals still play that important role, but they're not the end all be all. And I don't want everyone to think of them that way. Okay, so we've got a question here, which is, what do you do? I know that you said that that ultimately it's okay if you don't hit your goals, but what do you do if you don't hit your goals? Yeah. Yeah. So, look, what ends up happening is, so throughout the year, you're gonna set these goals, right? And then throughout the year, you're going to go through, and every time you do a money meeting, you're going to check on your kind of actual where you're at and how close you are to hitting those goals. So, again, back to our example, we wanted to hit $8,000 in revenues in January. If we're halfway through January, we're going to look and say, what are our revenues? We're at 5,000. Okay, great. We're on track. We're more than on track to hit the 8, or we're only at 2,000. Okay, we're a little behind. What do you do in that case? If it seems like you're not going to hit the goal that you set. And again, I'm going to take it back to systems, is I'm going to care a lot less about, so let's use the example of the $8,000 in revenues. We're halfway through the month. We've only made 2,000. So we're behind, right, on our goal. I'm not going to care so much about the fact that we're behind on the numbers. I'm going to look at the system and I'm going to say, okay, what systems have we put into place to generate revenue? And is the system working the way we want it to? Maybe we're still building it up. Maybe that's why we haven't quite gotten to our goal. Or maybe there's an area that we need to tweak so that it will work better for us in the future. But that's what I'm going to focus on more than hitting that $8,000 goal. Because at the end of the day, if I go around and I take on every odd job and I beg, borrow, and steal to get that additional $6,000 so that I hit the $8,000 goal, yeah, I've hit the goal, but I haven't built any kind of a system or process to be able to do it again the next month. Does that make sense? So I care a lot more about what am I putting into place that's going to enable me to replicate these results every single month than I do about ultimately hitting that goal. Cool? All right, friends, we are at time and I don't see any other questions in the comments, so I am going to leave it there. I hope this was helpful for you. As always, don't forget we've got our Q&A, and this month it's actually a joint Q&A hot seat next week. So please bring your questions to that. I hope everyone has a great night, and I'll see y'all next week.